What a terrible time we live in. I've already seen people compare the temporary ban on abortion in the Soviet Union with what's happening right now. Both those who hate the Soviet Union and those who claim to be inspired by it. And that is bizarre. I think first what's important to address is that the way we should view the Soviet Union, I believe as a historian, is as an experiment. You'll see that most early English language writers talking about the Soviet Union call it the Soviet experiment because they were truly doing things for the first time, like allowing abortion in the 1920s. Now, why did they do that? Prior to the revolution, the majority of women in the former Russian Empire didn't really have a choice in life. The majority were peasants and were expected and did have very large families. The revolution brought an opportunity for women to have a choice outside of motherhood. Part of that was changing the moral and family codes of the society. Anna Louise Strong writes excessively about that in her pamphlet labeled Marriage and Morals in the Soviet Union from 1927, geared towards an American audience, so I highly recommend you check it out. This was a change in thought of who you could have intimate relations with, the rights of women in and outside of marriages, the ease of divorce, the right of children in and out of wedlock. Something I really love that Anna writes about is how men didn't even always have to be proven the biological father. They were expected to pay child support and care for that child if the woman had it, assuming it can be proved that they did have intimate relations. And then, of course, abortion access. Women were not chained to the kitchen and motherhood. The problem is that with new moral codes that allowed, some would say, promiscuity, more pregnancies happened. And men in this new society often forced or heavily encouraged women to have abortions, often multiple. This did weigh heavy on women's bodies, and many would say that this new right was abused by many, and the harm done on these bodies was very evident. As the Soviet Union was an experiment, it is meant to be learned from. Everything isn't going to go well. This was something that didn't initially go well. And so they tried to rectify that by temporarily banning or making it much more difficult to have abortions. Kollontai writes on this heavily in her piece called On the New Abortion Law, July 17, 1936. She addresses all of the reasons for this law. The new law in the 30s put a heavier hand on men to be responsible for the children they produce. But also this included a new set of conditions of support for mothers and families, something the United States doesn't have. And I think that's one of the biggest factors here of how it's not even comparable, is even when the Soviet Union did temporarily ban abortions or make it more difficult, they also provided a lot of support for new mothers in regards of childcare and preparation and education. In the 50s, abortion would be decriminalized again in the Soviet Union. But don't be surprised if you start seeing comrades and not comrades alike sharing poster art from the 1940s and 50s and 30s, I suppose, that are anti-abortion out of the Soviet Union. There's a lot of context, and a lot of that context is the fact that mothers were actually taken care of and supported by the government. Or at least they tried to. What we can learn by looking at past examples of abortion access and restriction is that the issue itself isn't abortion. It's often education around safe abortion, the frequency of having them, who should have them, and how it can be done, and the level of involvement those responsible for creating the children and the government has within it. That is what we can look at and analyze and learn from. Just some things to think about, comrades.